So look at the products you have in the agricultural spectrum. There's three. There's the Live Earth soil conditioner. There's the LM32 Ag and the Liquid 6. For farmers and gardeners, which one should they look at or which ones?
So the soil conditioner is obviously the raw material that is designed for building soil organic matter. That's the reason you use it. The liquid humic acid is primarily to be used with your water for like newly established plants, um, trying to loosen up the soil, soil conditioning properties like for compaction. That's generally how they're using that one. And the fulvic acid, or LM32, is generally used for foliar application. Now, I've got nut growers in Central Valley, California that inject fulvic acid right down their lines for one reason and one reason only. It helps clean up their emitter heads. They actually get less calcium building up on their emitter heads when they add fulvic acid to the line. So, there's no hard and fast rule for how to use these products. I think that using fulvic acid for soil application is kind of like using tenderloin to make hamburger. It's probably not the best use of that ingredient, but does it make really good hamburger? Yeah. So it's just a matter of how you use these tools. Humic acid in a liquid form, as I mentioned, has a real high affinity for positively charged ions. So you could think of all the delivery mechanisms for that. So trying to stabilize ammonium, for example, that's one way of mixing it with your nitrogen fertilizers. I've got people in Idaho that use it with their phosphate fertilizers. And probably saying, Russ, how does it affect the anion? Well, what happens is the free calcium in these calcareous soils will attach to the phosphorus and reduce phosphorus availability. So if you put humic acid out with that fertilizer, that calcium will attach to the humic just as readily as it will the phosphate, and you get more net available phosphorus. So you kind of get, there's no one specific application, but you've just got to look at this as a tool. Now, how could I use this tool? We're creating space in the soil. What does it do? Does it store nutrients? Does it help salt go away? And we're not doing anything different than what Mother Nature has already done. It's part of every soil organic matter. So we're just trying to kind of make these soils act a little bit less like hard clay soils.
So for, let's say, a basic gardener that just wants to get started, the Live Earth soil conditioner,
Yeah, yeah.
apply
So
that.
anytime you got an opportunity to use live soil conditioner, I mentioned Rose Bowl earlier, and I'll mention them again. When they resawed that field 2 to 3 times a year. And when they resawed that field, they put the humate down before they do the sod. We got a little YouTube video on that. But yeah, that's one way of doing it, is to get the sod out. So if I was doing a yard and I said, hey, what can I do to really improve this soil? First thing I do is draw some humate and rake it in. Some people get real overboard about I got to till it in, do all these things. Our local high school, they did their ball field, and this will kind of be an eye-popping number, but they put 12 tons of humate down per acre on that ball field. And that's a legacy application. They're never ever going to be able to, dig up the football field and put it in again. It was a small county, ball field. But that soil organic matter will retain nutrients and improve water retention for decades. So that product will pay for itself in water conservation alone. Not to mention the other things like transplant loss. A lot of my landscape guys use humate in their holes. They dig their holes, take a little handful of humate in every hole, mix it in the backfill, plant the plants, and then put that in there. We did a water-wise planting in Salt Lake City with the city of Taylorsville, actually, and we didn't lose a single plant. No, I think we lost one out of like thousands of plants that went into this planting. So transplant loss, there's all kinds of benefits for using these organic acids and improving the soil around these plants. So that's how you use granular. You try to get more soil incorporation. After an aerification in the spring, before that freeze thaw action in the winter. A lot of people discount that, but in the winter, that soil is freezing and thawing and freezing and thawing. It actually creates a little bit of soil movement. You can actually put some soil amendments on there and kind of get them to work in a little bit. So those are good times to use the granulars. The liquids, you've really got to think why. I'm trying to break up the compacted soil. I'm trying to help with loosen the soil up or retain nutrients and try to get this plant's roots established. That's usually when they're using liquids.
So let's say somebody has a compacted soil and they want
Mhm.
to start applying a liquid humate to it. What what's the rate you think they need to apply, and how, over what period of time, until they start seeing some results?
So when I was a professional applicator, I would do 6 to 8 ounces per 1,000 square feet 3 times a year. And you could divide that out, say, I want to go every 2 weeks, go 2 ounces every 2 weeks, whatever, your delivery time. But that's one of them. One way of doing it is just about 6 ounces 3 times a year, 6 to 8 ounces. That's kind of a high line number. I wouldn't go any more than that. I call it my shots of whiskey theory or my scoops of ice cream theory, one of those two. But one's good, two's twice as good, three. Somewhere along the line, too much of a good thing is no longer a good thing. So,
You know, multivitamins maybe not beneficial for some people depending on their diet. Let's say you already have a healthy diet, right? That multivitamins kind of just insurance at the end of the day. For people who have soils that are high in organic matter, they apply their own compost, they use cover crops, they keep living roots in the soil, so their soils are already really good. Do you think you get much of a bump from using any of this?
there is a little bit of diminishing return. The better your soil is, the least demand you'll need for these is a soil amendment. And the reason is you're adding something that's already in abundant supply. You're adding humic acids because that soil is low in organic acids. If you got a soil that's high in organic acids, generally, it's a diminishing returns. The ones that see the benefit in the high organic matter soils are usually foliar application, where they're applying the humic acid as a biostimulant. And there's some really interesting research, and I'll give you one example. This was a cornfield in Illinois, and the researcher, his name is Dr. Dan Olk. They had a weather event, and they had one section of the corn treated with humic acid, and one section of the corn did not. And the weather event had taken and it lodged the corn. It laid it down. So it damaged the corn and was no longer standing up. What was interesting, though, is it laid it down to a line where the humic acid applied and where it was not applied. And they started looking at it and saying, okay, well, we've watched enough Sesame Street. We know one of these things is not like the other, so what's the difference? And they started looking at it. And what they found was the corn plants had more internodal roots earlier on. So those roots that kind of anchored that plant and helped that plant build its root structure out were in more abundant supply. So in that instance, it was foliar applied to the plant. And we know that even though it was a rich organic matter soil, we weren't really affecting the soil at that point. We were somehow stimulating that plant to either absorb more nutrients or make more nutrients available. Something was going on to cause that plant to be able to root better. And it could have been something as simple as phosphorus availability. We don't know the mode of action. What we do know is through a failed test plot, because the test plot was ruined at that point, but we did know that there was something occurring there, and it led us to start looking for other things. And we see the increased rooting ability in some of these plants. So yeah, if you've got a soil that is rich in organic matter, a soil application is probably not the right tool for you. But a foliar application might be the exact tool that you need to make these products ideal for your situation. Just remember, again, one is good, two is twice as good, three, somewhere along the way, you're not getting more benefit. And what we've actually seen in our university trials is what they call hormetic curve, where you get a growth response to a certain point and then it starts falling off. So, 4 or 5 gallons the acre might be too much. Around 3 gallons the acre might be the ideal spot for, applicators. So, that's, good where we kind of base our numbers at 6 to 8 ounces per 1,000 square feet.